Hey, what is going on, everybody out there? This is Jake James Lugo, senior editor here at thecoalition.com, and welcome to a brand new episode of TK Spotlight, where I bring on phenomenal individuals from throughout the gaming industry and the various corners of the internet. This one is going to be a fun episode because I've been wanting to do this for a while. I've been wanting to get this man on the show for quite a while. The Reverend, as he's known by many people, Jared Petty.
I'm afraid if you're looking for phenomenal individuals, you have way overshot the mark here. At the very best, I think mediocre is probably the best you're going to get out of me.
No. Don't underplay that. No. You're out here in these streets doing something. You're phenomenal. You're epic. You're good.
By the way, it is so good being here, man. I've known you for a long time now. We met all back through IGN when you were. I think you still do freelance work there, right?
Yeah, I'm already now past 3 years and change. So we're going to get into that. I want to talk a little bit about that stuff because it's been crazy because you were responsible straight up for me starting to freelance for IGN. But we'll get into that in just a second. But proper introductions, again, Jared Petty now making content on Patreon, Hot Blip Jump right now, as well as also doing stuff over at Kinda Funny as well, which is pretty cool. You did obviously you worked a long time over at IGN doing a whole bunch of stuff, especially with the wiki guide section. You did a little bit of stuff at EA, and you've been doing a lot. Let me put it that way. Your resume, dog, like it's pretty good.
That's very, very kind of you to say. I'm not sure if potential employers would regard it the same way, but I appreciate it. I've been busy. I can tell you that. I've had fun. I live a marvelously unfocused life, kind of a general practitioner of game stuff, and it has been an absolute delight and ball. I'm really just stepping out and deciding to make content again full time was not an easy decision to come to, but now that I've done it, I'm really, really happy about it because ultimately making stuff is what I'm best at, and I really do enjoy it.
Now, I want to ask a little bit about that because I recently took the jump and took the dive into opening up my own Patreon. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I started doing stuff like that, and I also started doing a little bit more outside of my normal stuff that I do, whether it's freelance or just stuff with the Coalition. You've been doing that for quite a while. Now, curious to know, like, when it was, those first couple steps, when you were first opening up your Patreon, when you were first getting up on YouTube, getting away from IGN stuff, and before you went to Kinda Funny, was it scary overall? I mean, besides the financial aspect of it.
It was terrifying. Yeah, it's terrifying for a number of reasons. One, of course, is the financial aspect because ultimately, the fact is, you go for, when you work for an employer, there's a kind of a contract there. You do work for them and they owe you money, and there are protections around that. But when you go out and decide to make something on your own for an audience, they don't owe you anything. They owe you nothing. Not one person who chooses to send me money every month as a part of my Patreon owes me squat. They are kind people that have decided that they like the work I'm doing and they want to help keep it around. But there is, ultimately I am beholden to them and their generosity, and I'm beholden to the ability to their ability to keep doing that, their willingness to keep doing that, to the idea of whether or not they like the product. People have so many options right now on who and what they can support, and money is always tight and precious. That's why I can never ever take the extraordinary opportunity I've been given for granted. But yeah, it's terrifying. And then going to work for Kinda Funny, that was never frightening because they treat me well. I knew they would treat me well. They're great people. I have a long-standing relationship with.
They're good friends of yours,
folks.
obviously.
Oh yeah, and I knew, and likewise when I worked for IGN, they took very good care of me and were wonderful to me there. So I've had a lot of great opportunities, but I wanted to go out. There are things I wanted to make that can't be made under any existing umbrella. The kind of work I'm doing right now with Hot Blip and a Jump, that's a product that's not really going to work as something that you would do at a larger ad-based outlet. It's very niche, it's very focused, it's very slow, it's not loud, it's not necessarily concerned with what's happening this week in games. And it's the kind of thing that can only exist if I go out and say, hey, folks, I'd like to make this. I think it's good. I don't think there's anything else quite like it out there. And if you're willing to support me, we can make this happen. And this was the best space to do that in. And the Kinda Funny has provided an enormous and wonderfully generous platform for getting that message out, while at the same time allowing me to work with them on Games Daily and Gamescast and other things that I love doing. Because there's nothing in the world I enjoy more than hanging out with a bunch of wonderful people and talking about the art form that we love and the hobby that we share.
Definitely.
So yeah, but it's frightening. The financial is terrifying. The day-to-day. I don't know how to run a business. Are you kidding? I don't know what I'm doing.
You're just freestyling. You're MacGyvering it. You're just kind of rolling.
I am with my life, and I'm not young. You know, not that it's any easier for a young or an old person, but man, I'm an old dude, and I'm just like, you know what?
For the record, nonsense. Okay, you're only as old as you feel. Once you hit 21, that's the cap. That's it. That's all you stay at.
That's the cap?
That's it.
All right. Well, I'll remind my arthritis of that someday. That's good to hear. But yeah, man, I mean, you know how it is. You've gone out and done this. You understand. You have been hustling and hustling. The freelance life is hard. I did it for a long time before IGN. I'm back in it now. It offers tremendous freedoms, but you trade those freedoms for other responsibilities. I mean, it seems like you can do anything you want until you're trying to figure out how to eat, and then it's a little different. I also have the advantage of having a spouse that's helping me through this who, was able to go out there and provide things like health insurance and a cornerstone for this whole thing. So I have a partner in the house who supports me in this emotionally and honestly financially to make this attempt possible.
Yeah, to me, that's the scariest part of the book. What I am curious about, though, is that much like Greg, Colin, and the rest of the guys when they started Kind of Funny, they had experience and a background coming from a larger outlet or some sort of entity before they went out onto their own like that. For you specifically, starting up your own YouTube channel, Hop, Blip, and Jump, and the Patreon account, before and aside from the Kind of Funny stuff, what did you feel like, working at your time at IGN, that you felt like you gained from it, your time over there, that you brought with you that really was an asset to you going out into this own venture?
Oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. IGN taught me more than I can imagine. So let's hit a few specifics, and this is hardly going to be comprehensive. First off, just knowing the people that I know there who can provide things like amplification, who are just out there to say, hey, Jared's doing a thing. We care about Jared. Please go out and check this out. Right there, just having people that are willing to go to bat for your work, who trust that you're going to do something good and who are going to watch it and support it and tell other people about it. Likewise, people that I can bounce ideas off of. Working on this pretty much, on the Hop, Blip, Jump stuff, that's me. So if I have an idea or something I want context on, I've got this huge pool of people that I can just text or call or meet up with and be like, you think this is a good idea? What do you think about this approach to this topic? Do you think this is and there's so much value in having all these smart, well-informed, contextually interested, educated, experienced people in the game industry that are willing to sit down and bounce ideas back.
That's a lot of perspective all over the place.
Oh gosh, it's so great. It's context. It's wonderful context. But then there's all the I joked about not knowing anything about what I'm doing. There's a lot of truth to that, but you learn about things like marketing and analytics and stuff that helps you get the episodes in front of the largest possible number of eyes in the smartest ways. It teaches you a lot about how you want to approach your subject matter and how you build audiences and how you find new audiences, because you can create the best thing in the world, but if nobody knows it exists, that doesn't help. And so you've got to make a good product, but you've also got to make sure people know that product is there and how to find it. And I keep using the word product, and I hope that doesn't sound gross. No, but the truth of the matter is that I'm in a business. I'm making art, and I'm pretty sure that even if I weren't making any money, I'd be making the same kind of art, albeit much, 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 much more slowly. But now I have more time to devote to it.
True.
But it is a product as well as an art form. And I think that's okay. I don't, Van Gogh sold his paintings too when he could. So not that I'm Van Gogh. As a matter of fact, I think I'm kind of the opposite.
Okay, talk that talk, Jared. Put it out there.
Well, no. Good Lord. That may be the most unintentionally arrogant thing I've ever said.
No, wow. Nonsense. You can
talk
what?
that
talk.
No one should support me now. Cancel your Patreons, everyone. I'm so sorry.
That's just mean. Straight up. Anybody who cancels Patreon things on something like that, that's just cold.
Well, Vincent Van Gogh is someone I'm wanting to like just pinch myself right now. I respect his work so very much. Hypnotic, seeing, especially when you see Van Gogh in real life. There's something he does with texturing that doesn't come through on a screen or a print. His paintings are very thick, and they catch light when you're in the room with them, and it's an entirely different experience standing in front of one than it is looking at a print of one or looking at one on the internet. It's hypnotic.
Cool.
I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of like when you see a picture of the Grand Canyon and then you go to the Grand Canyon. That's what looking at a Van Gogh was like. And I dream that I could ever have an iota of that kind of talent in writing or production. Anyway, that's enough about
You know
Van
something?
Gogh.
That brings up a good point I want to touch on, because this is a really interesting tangent. With me, I can relate a little bit because I get that same type of inspiration, or kind of like that outlook and perspective from things, not necessarily like visually, like paintings, like in your case with Van Gogh, but I get it from music. I listen to a lot of hip-hop music, and I listen to a lot of other music outside of just looking at visual stuff like what we do with gaming or movies, etc. And I usually sometimes pick little, or cherry pick little things here and there from those respective industries and kind of adopt it into my own stuff that I got going on with gaming. Like for you, what is that thing? Would it be, paintings or fine art or something like that? Or is it something entirely different?
Well, one of my great inspirations, several things I can think of immediately, and most of them are going to be film and television. One of them is the work of a scientific historian named James Burke, who was a writer and documentarian, and his incredible work in Connections and The Day the Universe Changed, which are 2 TV series he did, certainly have an influence on the way I approach my projects. Not that I have, again, any iota of the talent or focus that Burke had. But what he was able to do with that moves me to think about things, to think about what we're looking at in context. He's very big on the context that affects how we perceive things. When you look at something, what predispositions and preconceptions are causing you to see it a certain way. So Burke could be one. You're going to laugh at this, but Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers are.
No, I think that's real.
influence.
Real. Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers are legit. I think that's cool.
Yeah, they're 2 people who they looked at the world through gentle eyes, and they both worked very hard at it. People are very kind to me, and I do try to be a kind person. But the truth of the matter is, man, a lot of it does not come naturally emotionally. I have to work to be decent, and there have been lots and lots and lots of moments where I have strayed far from decency and kindness and said and done things that I regret very much. But you got to get up in the morning the next day and try again. And those people both, in very different ways, made it their mission in life to try to show that if you put an effort into listening, an effort into thoughtfulness, an effort into kindness and learning, that you could come out the other side of it a better person. They did it in different ways. Bob Ross, he's kind of a goofy meme right now, but he was a drill instructor. That cultivated quiet voice is something he deliberately chose to change in his life because he wanted to make his work more approachable and friendly to people. And what he said about that was not just some goofy spaced out dude. That was all very deliberate.
Yeah, nice hair though. Not gonna lie, that hair was beast. I'm just saying.
Okay, that hair was dope.
That afro was nice.
And Fred Rogers, likewise. I mean, you watch Mr. Rogers talking to the kid who's playing with the Donkey Kong machine, and it's one of those clips that I'm just captivated by every time I see it, because Mr. Rogers is talking to a child, and he's talking to him in the way you talk to a child, but not condescendingly. He's interested in what the kid has to show him. He wants to learn what he can learn from the child, instead of trying to educate the child. And it's a beautiful, beautiful moment. And that is a fact. So those television and film pieces are a lot of it. There's a lot more. I'm also very influenced by my faith, something I occasionally talk about. And I don't want to drive people away on this at all, because I know all of us have different perspectives. But I do take a lot out of that what I love about Christianity at its best, and Christianity can often stray far from its best, is the idea that you can become a better person and you're not alone in that effort, and that somebody can help you with that, and that you can screw up. And the word repent just literally means turn around. It doesn't just mean ask for forgiveness. To truly repent is to ask for forgiveness and then try to change.
It's not all punishing, because a lot of people say, when I say repent, and you see like different movies and cartoons and stuff, it's like really punishing.
Yeah, it's not punishing, and it doesn't absolve you of responsibility. It's like, yes, you still did a bad thing. Go try to make it better. Yeah. And I've often failed in that, but I like that idea. So that affects some of my work too.
That's interesting to hear that, because again, I could draw more parallels to that. Again, since you mentioned Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers, I could see a lot of that, or at least those parallels to something that's a little bit more philosophical for me, as opposed to just, again, the visual stuff and more the socialization stuff. Because for me, like, for example, just to pull an example out of nowhere, I watch a lot of Kung Fu movies. I watch a lot of Bruce Lee specifically. I'm pretty sure you've seen Bruce Lee movies like Enter the Dragon, etc. correct?
Exactly. Oh, absolutely.
I read a lot of his books.
Bruce Lee movies.
Yeah, I've read a lot of his books outside of just watching the movies and stuff. And there's a lot of philosophical things that branch out to every aspect of life. And I could see those same type of things that how you talk about Bob Ross and you talk about Mr. Rogers. Those same types of ideas and same types of concepts are also branching out to all forms of life like that. And again, just adopting them into your own stuff that you have going on. And I think that's really good. And more people need to do that, because I think that we get into this doppelganger effect where we're constantly trying to be like, the person that we admire, that rather than just take example from them and then kind of adopt what's good about them into what we can make good about ourselves. But that gets into a whole nother long, like 3-4 hour conversation of stuff. But I want to know a little bit about your time at IGN, because obviously, like I mentioned before, you were responsible for me directly, pretty much, for becoming a freelancer for IGN. And I've always admired your work and a lot of the other work that you've been associated with while you were at the website and stuff. As someone that was, responsible for not only doing and making content over there, but also working with freelancers like me at the time, here and there. I mean, do you have like a little bit of a different perspective now that you're far removed away from it, or looking back on it over time, whether it was with someone like me or just other people over time as you were working over there?
Well, yeah, I mean, my perspective certainly changed because I've effectively moved myself back into that role. I'm working right now. I'm not going to say who with yet, but I'm working with my first outlet as a freelancer right now, and now I'm the person making the pitches again. I'm on the other side of it, and it is an interesting role reversal because folks at websites are very, very, very busy in media. And they're gatekeepers, and they know it, and they take that very responsibly because they know how they got there, and they want to open doors, and they also respect the work of people who are talented like you, who brought really great work to the site. But you still have to, in the end, it's still a matter of trying to strike that balance between good ideas, respecting their time and energy, and not disappearing into the weeds. And all of those are a part of it. I think about a lot now. And I think I have that down pretty well. The people I'm working with right now, I have great relationships with, and so I don't have to worry about that as much. I think a lot of it that people miss is that it's about building trust.
Yeah.
And building trust there is some shameless self-promotion involved. There just is. But there's also just showing good work and showing somebody that after a while, they don't have to worry. When they hand you something, they know it's going to get done right, and they know that you understand what they're asking for in a few words, and they know that they're going to be able to look at it, do their edit pass, and put it up on the site. So on this end, I think about that a lot. But also, I like the fact that I loved working with freelancers when I was at IGN. I absolutely adored it.
Really?
I get to work with such quality people. My favorite thing I got to do every year at IGN, or most years, I was, by the end, I was kind of a Swiss Army knife at IGN. I did a little bit of everything.
Like a jack of all trades, practically.
Yeah. News and reviews and features and guides and did some hosting and did some, a little bit of everything, scripting. But when I started, I was mostly a guide writer. That was what I was hired on to do. And I worked with the guides freelancers a lot. And when E3 would come around, and you coordinate those guides volunteers and guides freelancers to come in and work, and those were two different groups that we had. Folks that were, yeah, I loved it because you'd just be sitting in there in this massive multi-day chat session, watching the E3 presentations roll out one after the other, and everyone with so much fervor and energy just popping in and everybody just adding as much as they could and working to. And I think there's a time for hard work and a time for rest. But during E3, that energetic feel just made
go time.
You didn't want to stop. Yeah. And so I was sitting in that room, and when you're watching E3 in the IGN War Room, there's 150 people around you in this giant warehouse room with this huge screen, and there's a studio set up next to you, and there's everyone just hunched out, and there's this incredible esprit de corps. And then I'm online with a lot of people that are just grinding and working hard because they just want to write about games because they love it.
I want to ask about that specifically, Jab, because during the because I've seen you at E3 a couple times, and at one time I saw you a little bit more extensively at E3 because again everybody's so busy and stuff. At the IGN War Room, or just E3 in general for everybody that was on staff at the time, was it always tense because of the severe amount of work that you guys had to do covering everything at the show that week?
I wouldn't use the word tense. I'd use energetic. When you got there, IGN really did have and does have, and in a lot of ways, a just remarkably amicable internal culture when it comes to the people producing content next to each other. And so everybody, for the most part, respected one another greatly and had prepped for months for this thing. And when you got in there, you looked around and everybody else was there for you and you were there for them. And I know that sounds hokey, but it was remarkably true in that room for a lot of people that there was a lot of support to be had. Now, not everything was always perfect. Nothing with any group of people ever is, but it was pretty darn rad a lot of the time. And so tension was largely replaced by energy. You knew where you needed to be, and you knew when you needed to be on camera. You would literally be, coordinating something on one laptop with a group of freelancers, writing an article on the other, jumping up, running into the studio, filming a show, running back to your seat, trying to find somebody to get a detail, finding them, sprinting down to the convention center, hopping back on with the freelancers, watching a press conference the whole time, and talking on the phone. And it was that for, 18 hours a day for a week.
Yeah.
And
it was severe.
But that was everybody.
No.
And you don't want to live your whole life that way. But in that moment, we were full, most of us, I think, speaking based on the experience of a lot of people around me, there was a lot of joy in it.
So let me ask you this then, because to me, again, I've seen you guys work like that, again, as you guys are running around and stuff, and you guys get a lot of stuff done back in the day at the time. Was there ever a moment or any type of moment that you could remember at any E3, it doesn't matter which one, that there was ever like a close call? Like, everybody needs to really be on their P's and Q's, but like, stuff was either going wrong or stuff really needs to be like, audibles on the playfields, like a lot.
Oh my gosh, listen, the joy of a newsroom, even in so I want to be very clear. I'm not a journalist. I'm an entertainer. I'm a technical writer. I may even someday be an essayist or documentarian, but I'm not a journalist. But I worked with real journalists. And the thing about a newsroom is that it is, even in our field where there's not, we're not talking about life or death stakes most of the time, it is entropy in action all the time. The number of near misses and screw ups that happen on an almost regular basis when you're parsing that much information that quickly and you're trying to do it responsibly and you care about the quality of what you're getting out there. Oh, dude, so much went wrong all the time. I mean, that's the question was what you did with it, what you did when something went wrong. And one of the things that usually made me proud during my time at IGN was when it came to the handling of the news and the content. There was a great deal of internal accountability around a lot of it and support. And that didn't always happen the way you'd want it to, but it happened most of the time. And I can think of time after time after time where people went to bat for me and where I went to bat for them and where we found a way to make it work because we cared about what we were making.
That's good.
And it was nice. Yeah, I don't want to paint a rosy super picture, but it is. It is the best place I've ever worked. It just is, and a lot of it was ultimately the quality of so many of the people and their devotion to covering something they loved. It would be an absolute lie to say that everyone got along all the time. Everyone agreed on everything, and none of us ever screwed up. Of course not.
Well, yeah, you fight every once in a while with people that you're around with most of the time, exactly. I'm pretty sure.
But, there was really just so much less of that than you'd imagine. You really, that's the part that was amazing, was that by and large, we wanted to get it done and get it done well.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I think that's fair to say. I really do think that's accurate.
So let me ask you this then, being within that type of environment or being within those types of environments and now being where you're at this point in time, with Hop, Blip, Jump, and then obviously got kind of funny. What do you feel like with people that are either coming into the industry or trying to make it on their own and stuff, what do you think is the one thing that they're always missing, or the thing that they take a little bit longer to understand, having been someone that's been, highly experienced in all this stuff over time? Because recently, and the reason why I bring it up is because I was on a podcast show not too long ago as a guest, and that was one of the same type of questions that came up to me and stuff. And I always felt like, it was the intimidation factor, being intimidated by the fact that there's a lot of stuff to do. But I'm curious to know what it is from your perspective.
When you say the industry, are you talking about the press and entertainment side, like the coverage side, or are you talking about making games?
Well, more so the coverage side, because again, that's what I know. Like that, because obviously I'm not a developer. I don't know what it's like to make a game. And I don't think most of us that usually get into this know what it's like to really make a game like that. So really the coverage.
Yeah, I've been able to touch both worlds, so I wanted to check which. Okay, so let's talk about the coverage side. In my opinion, the thing that people go in not understanding is that you can do everything right and still fail. That is the hardest, worst thing about loving this line of work. You can do absolutely everything right and still fail. There are simply not as many opportunities as there are skilled and willing people. You can have the perfect plan, make the best content on the best schedule, make all the right moves, know all the right people, connect to all the right gatekeepers. You can have the most wonderful relationship with your audience. You can produce and produce and produce and churn and grind and work harder than anyone else, and you can sometimes still fail. Success in the video game coverage industry does, I believe, most of the time require diligence, skill, thoughtfulness, and perseverance, but it also requires luck.
Yeah, facts.
And that is a hard thing to hear, but it's true.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that because, again, in my own personal experience, and again, I'm going now between around a little over 7 years being part of, trying to make all this work and stuff, and that is straight up facts. I've had experiences where I've done a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden, something out of my control will happen. Like for you, over all this time, has that happened to you, whether it was before or after IGN, where, again, like you mentioned, doing a bunch of stuff and making sure everything was good, then something out of your control just kind of took it away from you?
Yeah, absolutely. When a long time ago, when there was a corporate shift when I was working as a freelancer, and this was at the time I was freelancing for OneUp.com, and then OneUp got picked up by IGN, and for a while there, I really wondered if I was going to have freelance work anymore. My connections were changing, the staff was changing, the priorities of the site were changing, and the work I was doing was not necessarily going to be congruent with their plans going forward. And I went there. Now, some of that was probably the fact that, frankly, at that point, I was much, much less the writer that I. Jesus, no way to say this without sounding arrogant. Yeah, I was not. I ain't great now, but I was even worse then. How about that?
Nah.
But some of that was, frankly, that I had built those relationships. I had built a way in, and then that way in, because of things outside my control, just ceased to exist. And I effectively had to restart a lot of that I built. My connections were going other places, and it was really tenuous. And I had to take kind of one last gasp shot.
You have to adapt.
At the time that I ended up having what became my IGN breakthrough, I had not worked for the company in freelance for 6 months before that.
That's scary.
Yeah, I'd been doing work before that, but then it dried up. And fortunately, I did something else they really liked, and it all came together. And eventually, I became a freelancer, and they got picked up. But there was or became a freelancer again, but there was a while there that somewhat for factors outside my control, those opportunities weren't as available. And that happens a lot. That's the nature of this business. And there's 100 ways that can happen. And the other part, again, is that the problem is sometimes that you're looking at 3 resumes and they're all great and there's one job.
Yeah, and that's like scarier for being someone that's the person applying for it, right? Not so much being the person that's looking at them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got a fair bit of experience in this industry now. I've been working as a games writer since I think 2009, right around then. And so almost a decade now. And if I went tomorrow and applied to an outlet, I wouldn't feel safe that I would even get an interview. Not that I wouldn't, but I wouldn't assume it. I'll put it that way.
So because of that,
there's so many talented people out there.
Because of that, though, Jared, do you feel like eventually over time, whether sooner or later, that might get a little bit better? Like, would that become a little bit easier for people that are just getting into it now? Or is there just way too many people that it's going to get worse?
I think that, honestly, if we're talking about getting a job in an outlet, it's probably, I'm not a prophet, but my suspicion is it's going to get worse. And that's because of the way ad revenue on the internet works. And the narrowing of that field that's taking place. Now, when it comes to the kind of stuff I'm doing right now, the self-promoted channels and networks, I think there may, if the gateways, again, if the gatekeepers, if YouTube and the other groups continue to play nice, there may be more opportunities around Twitch and video creation on those, and even maybe new opportunities to write. But I think that the traditional outlets have consolidated quite a bit for a reason, and that's that they've figured out the kind of material that works, and they're going to continue to produce that material, and they are refining that process continually and looking for the right way to make profits in a world where ad revenue, as we see across all media right now, this is no secret to anybody, continues to be a source of concern for media companies. And this extends well outside of games and into everything from traditional newspapers to your CNN.coms.
All over the place.
Yeah. And so maybe that trend will change, but until people figure out ways to make more money around that, I think you'll see less of it. Now, what's happening around integrated marketing does open some doors, but that largely opens doors to creating more integrated marketing material. Integrated marketing being a situation where, like, you're reading something on The Onion and it's, sponsored by Red Bull, and then you read the article and it has something to do with Red Bull. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that at all if you're transparent about it. As a matter of fact, some of those sponsored articles on The Onion are really funny, and I'm glad they exist. But it is a different kind of creature than, let's say a game review. And that does present some interesting situations there. Most of the major outlets have managed to very cleanly and clearly point out when something is sponsored content and when it's not. I think IGN does a very good job.
They did it with Humble Bundle at one point when they acquired the Humble Bundle or did that type of business deal. When I think they did a whole post on it on the website talking about it. I think they talked about it on some of the podcasts as well. So they really went out their way to put it out there for people.
Oh yeah, they're very transparent. That's one of the things I liked about working at IGN was that there was a lot of awareness about that kind of transparency. There's a million. Seriously, it was the best job I ever had. I worked. Although I'll tell you what, the nice thing about going to work for Greg and them is that I feel like I've come home. I walk into that office full of joy because it reminds me of what I loved about working at IGN. And it's that same kind of culture, that same kind of, they really do have a lot of joy in what they do. It's work, but it's good work.
And it's fun work to you, apparently.
Yeah, very fun work for me. Yeah, I mean, there are parts of my job I don't like. I mean, I love putting the videos together, but man, 80 hours into capture. I mean, you make videos, you know how it is.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? I really could just go to bed instead of capturing, Scream Ride Coaster number 19. But I need Scream Ride Coaster number 19 to finish the guide. Scream Ride, that was a JJ guide, right?
Yes, that was the first official one besides the one that I did that was like the probationary period. That I always tell the story where you had me do Freedom Wars on PS Vita, and I really wanted to do Freedom Wars at the time because that was when Greg and them were still there. They were talking about Freedom Wars constantly. It was Greg, Colin. They were always talking about it on Podcast Beyond and mentioning it. I was like, something, that's the guide I want to do. So I did that, and then the next one was Scream Ride afterwards.
Yeah, we usually try to bring new people on that have demonstrated some skill as volunteers when they can make significant well, I'm saying we do. I don't work for them anymore, but when when I did wikis, and I think a lot of this is probably still true because a lot of the same people are there, frankly. Yeah, what you did was you went in and you did some really good work on several guides and got it in front of the people who curate the guides team. And then you reached out, and if they liked your work and they were, you had your good grammar and you had your good writing and you had your good screens and you were making your good videos, maybe they got in touch with you and you kind of did a smaller game. Because much like the Freedom Wars, it was a Vita game, and that compared to some of the AAA stuff we were writing guides about, it was kind of niche, but it's still important to people. So we'd assign those out to a person as a kind of a probationary guide to be like, hey, let's see how you handle a whole big project. And that was yours. And then after that, you did Scream Ride, and that was the first one you did video on, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah, that was the first one that I tried to do video on. I know that because that was the first time where I captured video and I put it all together and then I sent it in. And I also tried at the time to do VO, and it was completely terrible compared to what I do now and stuff. But also, I thought also within that, I want to say that first year and stuff, because I remember at E3, I remember you sending me a DM. It was like, hey, listen, I got this guide for Fallout Shelter. Do you want to do this? I remember getting like 2 or 3 DMs. I actually doing this. So I'm like, okay, yes, let's do this. So I just and then it hit me. It's like, I'm at E3. I have to deal with all this stuff to E3, but now I got to stop everything to go do this guide stuff, like right immediately when I get home. And I was like, okay, nope, time to get to work and stuff. And I just completely dived into it. I remember staying up for like really late for hours on end, like after E3, in order to work on something like that.
I love guide writing, but it is, in my opinion, the most consistently time-consuming form of game writing.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it is a great service to people. You are helping people have more fun, and I drew a lot of pure joy from that. But writing a guide takes forever.
Yes,
it does. And,
here's a funny question I want to ask you, because I have a worse horror story with this, and it was for me. I think this was still before you had left IGN, where I had to do the stuff for Dark Souls 2: Scholar of the First Sin, and that was the worst, the absolute worst time I had writing a guide, because I do not like the Souls games. I think they're way too hard and they are not fun to kind of hold through. Imagine having to play that for a guide, and I think you did, because you did that guide.
Oh, I did the Dark Souls 2 stuff. Yeah, I did it along with Sean Saris. He and I worked together on that, and let me tell you what, I was glad. I mean, I like Souls games, but Saris is a real Souls expert. And when I got around to the second half of that game, I was real glad Sean was helping out with it. Because
I did not like it at all. I was like, nope.
Oh, I love that game. But, man, let me tell you what. You know what's more fun than writing a Dark Souls game is writing a Dark Souls game with early code when there are no guides.
That is horrible.
And I think I've told this story before, but, there's just no info out there at all yet. You're playing the game early, working on the guide. I ended up, without realizing what I was doing, on the very first day I had Dark Souls 2, I joined the Covenant that makes the game harder.
Oh man.
And I didn't know it. And so I was just getting beaten up, and I was like, I know how Souls games work, and something is very wrong here. And I played it that way for like 3-4 days, and finally I was just like, what is... And then I was like, I went back and I read, and I said, I wonder... I restarted the game and I didn't join the Covenant, and I blew through everything I'd done over the last like 3 days in about 3 hours.
Wow.
Because I had gotten, I done got good.
You got real good at that point.
Until I hit the next wall, of course. But I was just like, oh my gosh, this is really funny. But yeah, you're playing a Dark Souls game blind. It's like, well, okay. But I also had a ball doing it, because it was so incredible not being able to search for help and just discovering absolutely everything on your own. And Dark Souls 2 is one of those games I think kind of gets a bad rap. People are sometimes, I think, a little revisionist on that game. And I understand that it was kind of disjointed in ways, and it wasn't as pretty. But they forget that Dark Souls 1 kind of chugged. And Dark Souls 2 did run on last-gen hardware quite smoothly. And so you had this kind of trade-off between artistic congruency and detail and a little more playable engine. And despite the fact that it was kind of a mishmash of ideas, I actually really liked it. I still enjoy that game. I was playing it the other day.
Man, I do not wish that on anybody. The crazy part is that I say that I did that, and I said I will never do something like this ever again. And then I got assigned to do the Neo DLC like sometime afterwards. I was like, no, my God, like it's one of those things where it's like those are probably the 2 times, you know, writing guides for IGN or just doing work in gaming and stuff where I really had to swallow my pride. And I've had very few instances like that where it was like a legit thing where I had to really kind of buckle down and do that. But those are the 2 that I could always remember. But for you, where do you feel like there's one moment where you felt like you had to swallow your pride or had to really buckle down to make something work, even though you felt like it wasn't working at the time?
Oh, well, here's a swallow the pride moment right away. It's actually related to Dark Souls 2. So for one of the DLC chapters, I wrote the review. Mm-hmm. And my save game at that point that I was bringing the review in on was New Game Plus Plus.
Which is like super difficult.
yeah. It's 2 levels into New Game Plus. And I was also playing, again, pre-release, which meant that there was no one online. So I couldn't get help. There was no bringing friends in to help out. And I got to the Fume Knight, which is the hardest boss in my opinion, in all of Dark Souls 2, not through all the DLC and everything. Others may disagree, but that jerk. And I did everything right. I disabled the stuff on the edge of the arena. I'd figured all that out. I fought him more than 100 times.
Oh, man.
One-on-one. And
that's a duel to the death, practically.
And I got him down to a sliver a couple of times. And in the end, I had to go to Dan and say, Dan, I'm at the end of this DLC. I know there's probably one boss beyond this guy right beyond. But I can't beat this on my current save game. And to get a new save game, I'd have to beat all of Dark Souls 2 again.
Don't tell me he told you to start Dark Souls 2 again, because I would have cried.
No, and he's like, you know what? We're just going to tell him in the review. And so I did. I just said, hello, I'm Jared, and when I review games, I finish them. But guess what? In this one, that guy wasted me, and I got to the end and could not beat it, and you need to know that about this review. I should give it a really good score. I like that. What
was the reaction to that, though? Like, I'm curious, like, what everybody thought about that. Like, were they like, okay, it's understandable?
My memory is most people appreciated the transparency. I think some people mocked me for not being able to beat him, but I felt much more vindicated. Again, it wasn't just not beating him. It was not beating him alone on New Game Plus Plus. Plus, I was a mage build, and mage builds don't fare well at all.
It's like range attacks with magic and stuff, right?
Yeah, and there was a lot that made that difficult. But I tried other builds, I tried other tactics, I tried agility builds against it, anything I could pull off. And in the end, most people that I remember at least, were pretty understanding about it. It also helped that eventually we wrote a separate article where From Software sent us a bunch of stats about Dark Souls 2 and how far people got. And it was just even outside of like New Game Plus Plus, but just like at regular level, only I think it was like 6% to 8% of people that faced the Fume Knight ever beat him.
Wow, that's crazy.
We published this. None of this is like secret. It's in an article
that
we wrote. But it was some ridiculously small percentage of people actually beat the guy at any level. And that made me feel a lot better because that was by far the most difficult, like the lowest percentage of victories in people who went up against him. And I was like, okay, I feel a little better about this. He just whips everybody.
Man, that's
but
crazy.
I still, to this day, I have not gone. That's actually, I talked about playing this the other day. I was like, I'm going to start a new Dark Souls 2 game and go back and beat that guy. Like, that's what was going on in my head because it still bothers me.
You got unfinished business to take care of.
Exactly.
That'd be crazy.
I know I could take that sucker, even on New Game Plus.
You need to make a video of that, like a Let's Play or something. Like when you get to that boss fight, and have like chronicle it and be like, "Yo, we got unfinished business. We got beef. You got to settle."
And that's my final orders. And again, there are real experts at that game who could do it. I happen to think, and I don't think this is. I'm very much a populist gamer. Games are for the people, and I think that it's okay to enjoy a game and still not be great at it. I understand that some games call out for mastery, and I appreciate masters of games. But I also think it's okay for us to have the perspective that somebody can just love something and not necessarily be the best at it and still have something thoughtful and involved to say about it. I mean, again, ultimately, my review was very positive, even though I wasn't the best at it, because it was a great experience. And I feel that way about fighting games and MOBAs and anything that often is associated with a high degree of mastery. What matters about games is that you're able to have fun doing it, or find meaning in playing it, or learn something from it. I think that's the most important thing. I very much respect speedrunners and tournament players, and I think they're people of extraordinary ability, and they're incredible in their dedication. But I also think that there ought to be a lot of focus in this industry on just rank and file people that want to sit down and play a game and aren't necessarily going to be the best at everything. And perhaps that's just an overly elaborate excuse for the fact that I suck at games. But I don't think so. I think that rather it's like Howard Zinn, I think, said about People's History of the United States, which is considered by some a work of radical revisionism and by others a work of absolute brilliance. What Zinn, if I remember this correctly, I don't want to misquote, but something to the effect of, hey, by the way, this is meant to be taken in the aggregate with all other history. I'm not rewriting history. I'm saying take history and add what I just wrote to it and take it all together.
It's funny how you say that, because I think this is a good, perfect segue to talk a little bit about Hop, Blip, Jump, because you take that same perspective or that same outlook, what you were mentioning about Dark Souls, about other games, and just the idea of skill and just the appreciation and the experience of playing video games. You implement that into your video essays with Hop, Blip, Jump. And I'm curious, when you're covering some of the different subjects, because I think you have about 2 or 3 episodes out now, right? Because I know I saw...
Yeah, I'm working on the 3rd right now, because they do come slow. It's that capture dough. And I'm trying to speed up the production.
You're doing good stuff, though, as far as the types of things that you're talking about with all of them. Because you talked about Mario, the Jumpman, in one of the episodes, and you talked about a bunch of other stuff in the 2nd episode. And I'm curious to know, like, when constructing those style of videos or those video essays and just your opinions and your thoughts with those, I mean, what is really the thing that really kind of like sparks that inspiration for you? Because you kind of cover a lot of history in those videos like that. And you cover, a lot of things that are kind of related to those types of history, whether it's talking about really old games like Atari 2600 going back to NES, or even more modern stuff now like PS3, Xbox 360 era stuff, or even now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think that because I like to talk about old games, people get the impression that I don't play new games. I love new games, or that I think old games are somehow better. I don't. I think that old games, again, are part of the conversation. I don't want to say that old games are better. I want to say that we can get even more joy by contextualizing our new games with our old games, taking it all together. It's all one more piece.
Yeah.
And likewise with Hop, Blip, and a Jump, I want to be one more voice. There are people making great Let's Play videos. There are people making great streams, and there are people making great feature videos. And what I want to do here is create another voice that's just a little different than the others, talking about different things. And video games as an art form have affected me deeply. I remember I wrote this note to myself once that Jesus and Mario have had in many ways very equal effects in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be blasphemous in that at all, but both have affected my career in extraordinary ways. I think I said in my career. Both have affected my career. I mean, the fact of the matter is I've been a minister and a video game writer. And that's a weird thing. These art forms have affected me since childhood. My earliest memories relate to video games. And this isn't about a nostalgia trip. It's about contextualizing a lifetime worth of what they've taught me so far with what I see happening in the world right now. So that's why it goes back a lot, but I wanted to touch on what's happening now. The next video, as a matter of fact, which is about generations, which is about parents and children and how that relates actually to sequels.
Interesting.
It's gonna have as much to do with Ninja Gaiden as it does with Red Dead Redemption. And that's because some things are universal to this medium. This point's been made many times by people smarter than I am. Right now, we are just leaving the silent movie era of video games. And this medium has not been around very long at all when you compare it to something like comic books or motion pictures or
television. That is totally true. Definitely.
And so I want to recontextualize the innovations taking place right now with what happened before so that we can have a reminder 10 years from now when we're looking back at PS4 as classic games and go, oh, wait a minute, what did those have to teach us as compared to what's happening right now? I'm big on context. I learned this, I think, again, ironically, a lot of this comes from my time, and I don't want to be preachy, studying the Bible. You can read something in the Bible, and if you just read a verse, you can make it say anything you want. You can take a verse out of context, stamp it on a bumper sticker, and argue for just about anything.
You can adapt its meaning, basically.
Yes. But if you read it in context, if you read what comes before and what comes after, if you study who wrote it, why they wrote it, what was happening in the world while it was written, if you study the language it was written in and how it was translated and the various alternate meanings of the words, if you do all that work, you get much closer to what it actually means to you today and what it meant then when it was created. And I feel like I try to do something similar with that with Hot Blip and a Jump.
Do you feel like, because that, to me, that's an interesting thought, and I think that's a very powerful thought. Do you feel like people now, or gamers now, people that are just getting into gaming in the more modern day era, and they're not really, too much focused or really have a care too much of stuff that has come before, do you feel like they need to kind of, look back a little bit more so in order to kind of have a better appreciation or a better understanding of the stuff that's now? Like, for example, we have people now, kids or even adults right now that are probably playing stuff on modern day consoles or even just playing stuff on mobile, but they don't really, go back, or they haven't had the opportunity to go back to the NES, to the Sega Genesis, to Super Nintendo, to the N64, even the PlayStation 1 for that matter, let alone anything else before then. Do you think maybe people need to be, a little bit more conscious about stuff that's from the past like that in order to have that understanding or appreciation of the stuff out now?
I don't think they need to be, but I think it's really helpful. I think if they're interested in seeing more of what there is, drawing even more joy and meaning from the good things happening around them, I think that context really helps. And I'll go a step further. I think that works both ways. I think people that don't play games anymore, people that sat down and stopped playing games after a certain generation, they don't have to play games anymore. There's nothing morally or ethically reprehensible about not wanting to play video games or having fallen out of the habit. But if they started playing those and have memories of them, and they're looking at modern games and they're not interested, they may be missing out on some real joy. And so likewise, I think that in both cases, it's about discovering more meaning in, old games mean more when viewed through the lens of new games, and new games mean more when viewed through the lens of old games. It works both ways.
I see.
And I really think that there's a lot to be said for that. And again, we only got so many hours in the day. So I'm one of those privileged people that gets to spend, most of my time thinking about video games. But there are video games, old video games and new video games are more accessible than they've ever been.
True.
And so
the industry's gone big, really big.
Yeah, we can find the games, and yes, video games are expensive. I'm not going to lie. They are less expensive in some ways than they have been in certain times, but they are still expensive. I understand it's an investment.
True.
But you have people out there like the Internet Archive, for example, archive.org, those guys that are, or the Video Game History Foundation, and you got people working to make these games more accessible. Archive.org just has huge collections of video games on it. You can just hop on the website and play in browser.
Like MS-DOS games and arcade games. I've seen that before. That's really extensive.
It is. So if you're just curious, the thing is that we tend to view, because I suppose we call it emulation syndrome, we tend to view things that are free as less valuable. And so sometimes you'll hop on, play something for 3 minutes, not be able to figure out the control scheme and be like, what's the big deal? And stop. That's not how it works if you want to find out why somebody cares about something. You can't just pop in, touch it, and be like, I ain't feeling it, and walk away. You got to spend a little time making sure you've actually ingested the experience as closely as possible to how it was originally presented. If that's in a browser, then that may mean, sitting down and reading instructions, learning the control scheme, spending 10 minutes dealing with arcane interfaces. And yes, that is irritating. But if you sat down with somebody you trust's list of the essential video games of all time, and you're wondering what the big deal is, and you've not spent an hour with it, then you may be missing out on something. I always flash back to childhood. It's a video game for the NES called Bionic Commando.
Yeah, of course. And classic.
Yeah, it is a bona fide classic. It is one of the best platformers ever. Bionic Commando came out at a time when platformers were just becoming a codified genre, when we were starting to have expectations for what into a platformer. And so Bionic Commando subverted those expectations. You could not jump in Bionic Commando.
You had to use the arm, basically.
You had to use the arm to swing. And so my first impression of that as a child was, you can't jump in a platformer? Why would I play this crap?
Why doesn't it play like Mario?
Exactly. I had learned the controls, and therefore I decided. I went back to it a few months later. Actually, maybe just been a few weeks later. And tried it again. And I didn't stop until I beat it. Because I was just like, this is unreal. This game is incredible. How did I miss this? This is like nothing I've ever played. The music is perfect. The action is perfect. The RPG elements are awesome. The power-ups are great. Oh my gosh, this level design. And I'm sitting there as a kid like, how? And I almost missed it because it was unfamiliar. When it comes to going back to an emulated game or to a game on a compilation, or you gotta give it an effort. Also, I also think this teaches us a lesson about modern games.
Yeah.
I have seen so many criticisms of shooters or adventure games that don't follow the exact pattern for control schemes that we've gotten used to in something like Call of Duty, for example.
Yeah, the modern FPS control scheme on consoles, basically.
Yeah. Right. I'm not interested because it isn't exactly what I've done before. Well, then how in the world are we ever supposed to try new things? Now, new doesn't necessarily mean good. You can try something new and it doesn't work sometimes. But if you're going to give up on something in 5 minutes because you have to learn that buttons are a little different than what you used to, you would never play Shadow of the Colossus.
Well, you can't do reviews for any game, practically, at that
point.
And
that's the part that, and I'm not trying to be critical, I just think that people are depriving themselves of joy through a certain kind of chauvinism about what they expect a game to be. You don't have to like everything. I don't want you to like everything. There's plenty of games I don't like. People are, I can be kind of warm and cuddly sometimes, but I have plenty of angry comments and thoughts.
I can't picture you wilding out. I'm sorry. I think of you as too sweet sometimes. I can't picture you just going buck wild on something.
Oh, there's plenty. It's happened plenty. Believe me.
Like people Jared hulking out. I can't imagine it. It's just a complete...
No, that has absolutely taken place. To be honest, JJ, I have a bad temper. It's one of the reasons that I try to be a little more gentle in my approach to things. Is that my immediate inclination is to get angry about a lot of stuff. And I don't think that makes it fake. I think rather it's kind of like the principle that you get in dialectical therapy. Having emotions are not the real you. They're a part of the real you. But your emotions and your thoughts exist side by side, and they both make up who you are.
Yeah, the full picture.
Yeah, if my sincerity were just my emotions, I would be a screaming rage Hulk. But there's the person I feel like a lot of the time, and then there's the person I'm trying to be. And the person I'm trying to be is a little more decent and a little more thoughtful and listens more.
And chill.
But doesn't always work out.
I think you're chill. I mean, for the times I've seen you, you've been chill.
Well, no, I'm chill most of the time. But again, I'm not. I think people give me too much credit sometimes, and I appreciate that. But the fact of the matter is we're none of us perfect, and a lot of us just doing our best. And so, yeah, I love this medium. I love this art form. There's even things about this industry I love, although the industry occasionally drives me nuts.
All of us.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful world. For the first time in human history, we have the opportunity to create interactive worlds. That is a very strange and wonderful discovery. I fervently pray that we can survive our own self-destructive tendencies long enough to explore what's possible in this art form and medium to its logical ends and begin to create even more exciting and amazing things that might actually begin to change the way we look at the world and the universe from to degrees and perspectives we haven't begun to comprehend. I mean, this video games, and I say this as an idealist, but I do believe it, have the potential to do something that almost no other art form can do. They can place us in someone else's shoes.
That's a neat thought. I've never heard that before. Put us in someone else's shoes. Like, explain like that, because I think that's a pretty cool, powerful thought.
Yeah, I mean, how often in life does a lack of empathy keep us from connecting? You know, when we go to war because those people over there, well, they're different than us. They might not even be really people, or they're people, but they're not as people as we are. You know, but we put ourselves in their shoes, and suddenly we understand, oh my gosh, these people have families, and they have dinner, and they have grandmas and grandpas, and they have hobbies, and they just want to live. And
gives us insight.
Yeah, it's placing you inside somebody else's life. I think about Gone Home. You know, placing me in the
by the way,
role of that character. You know, the potential that had for creating empathy in a person toward family, toward people that they may never have felt like before. What it can teach you about loving someone. Let me put it this way. I'm phrasing this badly. You know, maybe people that had never thought about what it was like to really love someone who was homosexual, somebody that grew up in a tradition where that idea is harder to accept, or where it's just given lip service. Well, of course we love, but we don't approve. And then you go in and play that, and suddenly you're a character who is emotionally invested in this person's life and what the rejection of that life is doing to someone, what the rejection of that personhood is doing. And you were emotionally invested. You were in the shoes. You are someone different than yourself, and it can teach you. It can expand your mind. It's like a trip it's like living in another country or on another planet for a while.
I think
you come back, you're never quite the same.
I think gaming is the only medium that's really has the full potential to do something there, because I don't get that from movies. I don't really get that from music. I don't even get that from comics or even other forms of fine art. I feel like because of everything working together, especially with all our senses, that is what, you know, distinguishes gaming and the ideas it could convey away from like a lot of the other different types of mediums and art forms. But with that being said, though, Jared, I wanted to ask you this, because we come to the part where I ask the big question, like what I ask every guest that shows up on TK Spotlight. So, yeah, this is the big one. Okay, get ready, strap in. So, with all that being said, you know, and all the stuff that we have mentioned before, and a lot of the things that we touched on about gaming as a medium, gaming as an industry, gaming as a culture and stuff, what is one final last thought that you could give everybody that you feel like they could walk away from listening to our conversation this entire episode, that they could feel like they could gain something out of it, something that you want to leave as an impression on them with it?
Okay. Go make something you're proud of and you love. That would be mine. And that's a very, I spent way too much of my life doing what I thought I should do. I spent way too much of my life doing what I thought was going to make people around me happy. I believe that we should be empathetic to others, that we should serve others, and indeed our highest calling in life is to serve others and be kind and loving and good and helpful to them. I also have come to understand that it is much, much more effective to serve others when you have some love for yourself and the kind of person you are, create something that makes you proud. It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't even have, it could be a game. It could be a story. It can be a piece of music. It could be a service project. It can be an enrollment in a soup kitchen. It can be a vocation that brings you joy every day. It could be a family you love, but create something worth making in your eyes. Do that through your friendships, or through your church or your mosque or your synagogue, or do that through your college social club or your Magic the Gathering group, or do it through your office football pool. Find something worth making that you can look back and go, I made that and it was good. If you can do that, you've done more than I think a lot of us ever get to.
Done a lot of good.
Yeah, you've done some good. And I really do think that while that sounds so mercurial or it sounds like esoteric successories nonsense, but man alive, how much time are we encouraged in this modern world to do anything besides what we have to?
True. Very, very, very true. Very factually relevant for a lot of people, not just myself, not just you as well, but I'm pretty sure to a lot of people listening. Because again, even as someone that like you and like a lot of our other colleagues that loves working or being part of something that we just love enjoying and just love engaging in and stuff, there's already so many other things that we're bombarded with that tries to take us away from it because obligations, money, bills, stuff like that. It takes us away from making videos, having discussions like this, making other shows, making artwork for a lot of other people, music, etc. And I think that's a really good thought. I think that's a really good food for thought for a lot of people listening to this.
And scope it, scope it to what's doable. If you feel like you don't have time to make the 90-minute movie you've always wanted to make the 90-second movie you've always wanted to make. If you don't feel like you have the talent to release a commercial album, don't release a commercial album. Download a SID tracker and make a song, and keep it on your phone and never show anybody if you want, but at least you made it and you did. And that's and then learn as you go and keep improving if you want to. We can't. Again, I know how lucky I am to be able to say this, but you don't want to get to your funeral and going, whoops, we're all going to have those regrets, but it's the most existentialist, esoteric crap, and also the most true thing I've ever heard. Go to the Henry David Thoreau. I didn't want to come to the time in my life where dying, I discovered that I had not yet lived.
Nonsense. You're living on this. And I think you with you in their case, and again, if I could be cordial for a second, I think you inspire a lot of people, myself included. And I don't mean that as just to gas you up. I'm not just being your hype man like that. I mean, in real all honesty, I think that you've inspired people like me to be part of stuff like this, as well as also others to listen and also go do other things, related to their own lives like that, whether it's gaming or otherwise and stuff. And I think that's something you should be proud of, Jared. Straight up.
Well, I like what I do, and I've been given a great opportunity. I don't know how long, I don't know how long this lasts, and so I'm just trying to make the best of it I can right now.
Definitely.
And see what happens there. When that's. And I wish I could actually follow my own advice a lot of the time. That's much like I think of if I have a mantra. It's Val Kilmer from Tombstone in my head, just going, "My hypocrisy knows no bounds." Yeah, I could say all these lofty things about stuff I want to do, and then I'm laying awake at 3 a.m. going, "Oh no, I'm so."
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Thanks for having me, JJ. It's really good being on here.
Of course, man. Again, Jared, I think that this episode, and finally, even though it took a while to get you on here, I think it turned out much, much better than I could have imagined. I think it's awesome. I think we had great talk, great convo, great stuff that I think a lot of people are going to appreciate all around.
I think I broke your time record. I'm sorry about that.
Not like I'm really going to stop the episode because it's that good. I mean, come on now, Jared. But even so, I appreciate it. You know, of you coming onto the show, talking with me. And again, I always love meeting up with you. I always love chatting up with you when possible and stuff. Right now, though, Jared, where can everybody find you? You're on Twitter, you're on Patreon, you're on YouTube. Where can everybody check out your stuff?
I'm all over the place, yeah. So Hop, Blip, and a Jump is a kind of part diary, part documentary, part essay series about how everything you love in games is connected. You can find that at hopblipandajump.com or hopblipjump.com. That'll take you to the Patreon page, and that has links to everything else. It's also on YouTube. I'm on Twitter at petty, Jared, COMMA, and they're in the middle. And I tweet very kind of alternate between esoteric thoughts, the occasional grumpy rant, and weird pictures from my kitchen. But I'm told that it's an all right place to hang out. But you can find me there. I, of course, am over at Kind of Funny Games on Kind of Funny Games Daily and the Kind of Funny Games Cast. You can find me there each and every week where I'm doing stuff. And I've got some writing stuff you'll see popping up soon. And more to that later. You can also, I make a lot of different things I'm realizing as I talk here. I also make a little podcast called Hop, Blip, and a Jump. Or no, not Hop, Blip, sorry.
Pockets Full of Soup.
A little podcast called Pockets Full of Soup about the people we're thankful for in our lives. That's on iTunes and Android, and you can also watch it on YouTube. And that's Pockets Full of Soup is the name of that again. And I just interview people about the people they're grateful for. That's been a lot of fun. I have a fun time with that show.
Definitely. They're going to be...
Yeah, there we go. So that's a few things.
I was going to say, there's going to be links to all that stuff in the description box as well as also on the website, so you guys could go directly to all that stuff that Jared had mentioned. You could check out his Patreon page, check out Hop, Blip, and Jump, check out Pockets Full of Soup, check out all the different stuff that he's out here doing a lot of great content. Yeah.
I am never shy about asking for money. If you've got the Patreon support to give, I am always glad to take it. And we do have some nice Patreon exclusives. I do some Patreon exclusive content that I think is pretty good. So
definitely
take a look at that if you're interested.
Definitely, yeah, definitely worth the $1 or dollars, whatever is out there. I know that's what Greg says, or one of the guys says that's definitely worth the $1. So you're definitely worth the $1, Jared. So just to clarify.
Oh, very sweet of you.
But definitely, that's going to be awesome. Hopefully, you guys could check out all that stuff. Jared, is there any events that you're going to? That's down the line. Are you going to PAX? Are you going to E3? Are you going to PSX? What's up?
That is all being figured out right now. If I'll be at E3 unless somebody ties me to a chair. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm ending up there, but I'll be down there almost certainly. I'm trying to make PAX West this year. That's a plan. I will not be at PAX East because I didn't get stuff together in time to make that happen. So PAX West, E3. I would be shocked if I'm not at PSX as well. Events planning is I'm just trying to make product lately, and so I have not done as much with events planning as I need to. I'm very new at this. I just quit my job to make content full time. So as I said earlier, I have no idea what I'm doing at this point.
Nonsense. Yeah, you're over here. You're in the captain's chair. You're doing good stuff. But hopefully I get to see you at E3. That'll be fun because I'm going this again this year.
I think we'll almost certainly see each other.
We're going to hang. We're going to go check out all those games. We're going to be blown away. It's going to be amazing. But again, thank you, Jared, for being a guest on this show. Finally.
Thank you, Jake James.
It was amazing. Guys, if you're listening to this now, again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. If you're listening to it on YouTube, make sure you guys leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the Koalition's YouTube channel for all our videos related to gaming, podcast shows, interviews, exclusives, a whole bunch of other stuff. And leave me a comment down below. Tell me if you guys enjoyed this episode. Leave me suggestions of other people that you want to see on the show as a guest and who I could go to, who I can invite onto the show. And don't forget that the show now is on iTunes. TK Spotlight is on iTunes. Make sure you guys subscribe to it on there on iTunes. Make sure you guys rate it when you can and spread word about it as well. So hopefully we can get more people checking it out and we can get even more cool guests on the show. But with that being said, though, we will talk to all of you again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.